Yo, welcome to yet another episode of Roundball Ramble. I am your host, Corbin Ford. You can find me on Twitter at CorbinNBA. This is a Sports Ethos presentation, like the intro says, so check out Sports Ethos on Twitter at Sports Ethos, online, sportsethos.com. Pretty simple, SPORTSETHOS. I say it every time just to remind myself as much as you, but definitely make sure to do that, not just fantasy basketball coverage, but also NBA, baseball, football, and now the WNBA as well. So definitely make sure to get on board with that. Also, while you're there, please take a moment to follow at Ethos Fantasy BK on Twitter, the single most dominant basketball and fantasy newsfeed on earth. Get all your NBA news in one handy Twitter feed. It's faster than competition and provides more analysis too. Again, that's at Ethos Fantasy BK on Twitter. Follow now. Well, today on Ramble, we're going to do what the name implies. We're going to ramble about the Roundball, and this time I am pumped, honored, just ecstatic to have with me a guest because we're going to turn our attention to the NBA draft, specifically the 2022 NBA draft, some of the prospects, and with that, I brought in a scout, an analysis form, basketball analyst consultant, an author, many hats. Just happy to have some time with him here on the show, Richard Lu. You can find him on Twitter at RVL Hoops. Also, make sure to check out NBAscoutinglive.com to see more written work from, I think, both him and his brother, NBA content, a lot of deep dive scouting analysis there as well. And then on Amazon, I have the link. He does NBA almanacs pretty much twice a year. One like a draft almanac, one a more general NBA preview almanac. Great books. I have a bunch of them, so definitely make sure to check that out too. With that long intro out the way, Richard, how you doing, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Of course. I'm excited and pumped to kind of have you on, not only just to talk again. Just been a minute, but also just to be able to go into the draft. And with that, this 2022 NBA draft, just being around reading different not only draft boards and having some friends of mine who do some draft things as well. But I'm kind of familiar with it, but just for the listeners, what are your thoughts on this draft class as a whole? Like, how does it compare to the 2021 draft class, the 2020 draft class? I've heard that it's not as good of a like top tier, like superstar kind of potential draft class. I've heard there's not as good shooters involved. Like, what is kind of your overall take of this draft class as a whole as we are right now?
Just in general, probably this class is probably closer to 2020, where, I mean, if you would go back a couple of years, people were at the time kind of saying that draft was a little bit weak. And so, they're saying kind of the same things about this one, but, you could see, there's some value to be had kind of, not only kind of with the first few guys at the top, but, kind of probably if some guys kind of, in the rest of the draft, they land in good spots, you could see maybe some guys overachieving out of this, but so probably I would say, it's closer to 2020. It doesn't quite have as much kind of upper end talent as say last year's had. So that's kind of where I think this draft is at.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense for sure. And that's something I've heard, especially, in terms of this class, you hear the names, last year, you heard the big prospects that were out there and how they would shine. I know, it's always 3 or 4 guys that it's centered on come draft season that people really kind of focus their attention to. In regards to this draft class, is it like last year's? I mean, last year's, of course, all we heard, you had, of course, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, of course, Scotty Barnes, Jalen Suggs was a big guy. Those 4, Evan Mobley as well. Those are the 5 that were around there. Of course, there was a lot on Jonathan Kuminga as well. And then it started branching out as more analysis as we got closer and closer, of course, to the draft. This year, is it really more like a top 3 draft class in terms of potential NBA stars, or do you think the list goes deeper? And of course, of those top 3, I'm talking about like a Jabari Smith Jr. From Auburn, Apollo Banchero from, or I'm saying it right, Banchero.
I've heard it. I've been going Banchero, but I've heard it both
ways. Okay.
Yeah, so when we get closer to draft,
we'll know for sure. Yeah, but him out of Duke, and then of course from Gonzaga, I think Chet Holmgren as well. So is it just top 3? Do you think there's more guys outside of that have some potential superstardom? I mean, I know it's super early, but the draft. I mean, you guys project out. Like, what are your initial thoughts? And I'm really curious.
Well, sort of early at this stage. I mean, the group of 3, Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren, Banchero, those 3 have started to kind of a little like separate themselves as sort of the top 3 picks, but anywhere, kind of the gap between say 4 and like 24 isn't super high. And it's one of these things where you may, again, if it always kind of sometimes can come down to like the right prospect landing in the right spot. So, wing guys, like as in, I guess you learn they can come from anywhere really. I mean, if you look at, someone like Desmond Bane was like the last pick of the first round. Jimmy Butler was the last pick of the first round in his draft.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Middleton was a second round pick, Kawhi mid first. And so you have, a situation where, like wings, it's, it's either polish or, it's like you either, hope, you bet on polish and maybe the tools they have enough tools to kind of make it, or they have tools and maybe they, their work ethic carries them to become way more polished than they ever did out of the draft. So, you could see like with this crop of wings where, they're kind of all over the place. Mm-hmm. So if you just get like, somebody in the right situation, they might overachieve. And then outside of the top 3, probably Jaden Ivey probably might, have kind of, yes, if there are certain things he works on, he can, he might be able to kind of level up and kind of, hit bigger than we might expect.
Okay, that is cool. I was definitely interested in that. And speaking of, I kind of wanted to turn attention to more of these prospects in particular, and really just as like an entry into this draft. I'm going to do more analysis myself as we get closer and closer to March Madness, of course. But I love to get like a bit of a scouting report on a few players. And so I have a few here. I just want to get your general take on, offense, defense, kind of how you think about them. And I wanted to start with Jabari Smith Jr. I know Auburn. I know 6'10". I know he's a really good shooter. And that's all I know. So, like, can you let me and the listeners in on Jabari Smith Jr., where he is, why he's being ranked so high, and what you see from him personally?
Yeah, I think, I mean, of the prospects, I mean, I'd probably say Jabari Smith is probably the safest. He has probably the cleanest profile because he's really sound two-way player. I mean, he's, as you said, great shooter. He can create his shot off the dribble. Now, offensively, like his main weakness is that he's not really an advanced playmaker. So if you kind of if a defense sends help over towards him, he's not quite able to kind of find the open man or find a release valve to kind of alleviate pressure. So he can kind of be forced into some tough shots. So you're starting to see now, as we get at this point of the college season, when he's been in SEC play and they've seen him for the second time, he's starting to kind of struggle a little bit more than he did, say, a couple of weeks ago when, they're just kind of seeing him for the first time. And so that's kind of the thing he has to work on to kind of to get better as an NBA player. And then defensively, though, he's really versatile defender. Just, he's 6'10". He does have the ability to protect the rims, good shot blocker, rebounder. And he has great mobility, like where he's not just, a guy who can, defend on the perimeter for a bigger guy, but he actually can legitimately defend out there and kind of hang with most kind of perimeter players, and good kind of roamer off the ball. So, if there's a guy you kind of say, okay, they can handle kind of the general chaos of kind of being on a bad team, this guy could probably be it. And so that's why he's sort of been pushing himself towards that, more towards, a number 1 overall pick. So that's with Jabari Smith.
Okay. So do you see him? I mean, right now you kind of say, of course, his shooting on the offensive end and the fact that defensively he's not just good as a big, he's just a good defender. Do you see him as more like how do you project him in the pros? Is he someone that, like you said, he's the safest? So is he coming in kind of knowing like a bigger 3-and-D type role? Do you see hey, this guy can take, 25% usage? Like, where do you see him on the offensive end if on the defensive end he seems pretty set?
I kind of say, I think he could step in right away to be a 3-and-D. And then it's like, I think with use, he could, I think adjusting to a higher usage role. Like he might take a few lumps just because of the playmaking, his kind of playmaking issues might not make him ideal, but he might, career path wise might follow something like Brandon Ingram, where Brandon Ingram kind of, struggled a little bit like his first couple of years with the Lakers, and then sort of as he's kind of grown into his body and sort of gotten more familiar with the league, he's you see the talent start to kind of grow as his skill set and kind of maturity has kind of evolved. So he could kind of follow kind of that career path where it might be high usage might be a little too much for him at first, but as he sort of gets accustomed to it and kind of expands his game, he can kind of grow into that kind of role as a pro.
That makes sense. Okay, I'm definitely with that. I understand. So going from Jabari more to the next guy who's been talked about as much, if not more, leading up to it, Paolo Banchero. What do you see from him? His fit? I know he's been one of the guys been talked about from the very beginning. As a rising star, potential number one pick. What are your overall takes on Banchero?
I think offensively, he's pretty much, he's almost there. At the college level, just because he's so like physically, mature, he's, 6'10", upwards 240, 250, good ball handler, good kind of stationary shooter. He can get any shot he wants, really. It's just a matter of, just sometimes, he kind of, he kind of settles for kind of some kind of inefficient kind of pull-ups, but from an offensive standpoint, he shouldn't have too much trouble scoring. And one of the things that kind of goes in his favor is that he's a pretty solid passer. So if you bring help, he can kind of hit the open guy and kind of, so he could handle, usage. It's just, one of the things that's kind of, he's not really a great individual defender, but Duke kind of does kind of some things where they hide him a little bit, and so it's like he is the kind of guy, at least on the defensive end, kind of the comp that comes to mind defensively is someone like Marcus Morris, where Marcus Morris isn't really a great individual defender, but he's part of very effective defenses because he has the kind of body type that can be used kind of in switches where he can handle bigger guys, handle smaller guys and wings for short enough stretches where he won't look terrible.
Yeah.
And so that's so defensively, Banchero might not be plus, but he still might be useful. So then it's just a matter of coming to offense. And so one of the things he has to work on is a little inconsistent shooting off the dribble and shot selection, kind of, being maybe a little more selective and taking, shots to kind of boost his efficiency. So that's, kind of where he's at.
Got you. Where do you think his best fit at the pro level is, just to start? Is he someone that you could see, let's say if he's going to Orlando or Oklahoma City, is he someone that you think should take like a backseat to maybe one of their higher usage guards, like maybe Oklahoma City, playing off of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander? If he's going to Orlando, like they have a lot of guys, Jalen Suggs, and of course, Cole Anthony. Is he kind of playing off of them? Is he a guy that can step right in and take over on the offensive end there and just kind of adapt on the defensive end and pick up more as he goes along? Kind of where do you see it from what you see at Duke from Paulo?
Yeah, it would be kind of an adjustment for him to be kind of a secondary guy because he's been kind of the lead guy pretty much his whole life. So yeah, it would be, depending on, again, if he goes to like an Oklahoma City where he could get, playing with someone like Shea, SGA, he would get easier shots. So it might, allow him to kind of grow into a more efficient way. But, if he has to take on volume, he has the skill set to do it. So it's just a matter, so, some of this is not really, again, if he lands in maybe Houston, maybe a little bit best of both worlds where, he might be, kind of co number one Jalen Green or someone where he could take on volume and, and he doesn't, and he's not by himself. So it's, so yeah, but I think, but for the most part, I'm pretty solid. He probably could handle handle kind of the workload. I mean, if and eventually get there, as long as a team kind of stays relatively patient with maybe some initial growing pains.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. I think that you're right. It's a fit where, like you mentioned in Houston, we can kind of get the best of both worlds there. But I definitely think it's gonna be intriguing to see as we get closer to, of course, NBA draft season, kind of where he falls, and projecting the best fit at the pro level will be great. Moving on from him to the other guy in the top three, Chet Holmgren. Gotten a lot of stuff on him, heard a lot of things about him, just this 7 foot, like guy who can shoot a three and block shots. Tell me some more about Chet, please.
Yeah, I mean, Chet Holmgren is really uniquely talented guy. I mean, it's just, he's, as you said, 7 foot, good ball handler, can pass, knock down shots. I mean, he's insanely effective in transition. I mean, his last I checked on Synergy, I mean, his effective field goal percentage dropped to 95%, where it was, he's 75% in those situations, and he's making 2/3 of his threes. So just, a guy in the open floor who can handle, pass, hit pull-up jumpers, so that's something that's really, intriguing in terms of his skill set. Then in half court, it's kind of been tougher to kind of get a read on him, just because, he's kind of in this odd kind of secondary role where he's kind of, where he has to kind of defer to kind of some of the upperclassmen on the team. But you still see things that still see kind of ways that he can be effective, where he's very good rim runner, just with his length and athleticism, just, an ability to catch lobs and finish at the rim. And then he's a very good spot up 3-point shooter. So, he can kind of stretch the floor, but, they rarely give him kind of opportunities to really create for himself. And he's always kind of been sort of a guy, even in high school, because he and Jalen Suggs used to be teammates in high school, where he's always been the guy who has been in the position to defer. So there's a little bit of concern that he might not have that sort of alpha sort of mentality to be a leading scorer. But I think if you put everything kind of his skill together, he still can be a really kind of dynamic player that could really help a team on offense, where, if it's, roll to the rim, maybe use his handle and pass, short roll playmaker, stretch big, he really, he has a lot of, stretch big, and then his transition skills, you could get some really interesting value out of that. And then defensively, even though he's rail thin, where he's listed under 200 pounds for a guy 7 feet tall, but he shows enough physicality where, he kind of tries to stay in there, even though every bigger guy that plays against him tries to kind of bully their way through him. But, he kind of stands in there, he's good enough to kind of stay in there, and he can block, really good shot blocker. And he's got solid enough mobility where he can kind of hang, he can defend on the perimeter and kind of play in kind of some switch heavy kind of schemes.
That's cool.
I mean, so it's just going to come down to whichever team gets him has to kind of be creative in kind of his usage, or else he just kind of might be sort of pigeonholed into that sort of Miles Turner sort of.
Yeah, that role, that stretch
kind of that stretch kind of rim protector role. But but if you really want to unlock kind of his skill set, you really, you got to kind of got to get creative with lineups, kind of in the way that, Cleveland's kind of used Evan Mobley, where in those kind of jump, kind of utilize, kind of take advantage of kind of his kind of unique body type to kind of create different matchups and things like that.
That is cool. That is cool. I appreciate you breaking it down in such a way and showing the versatility that he kind of brings to the table there. And also, I guess, the potential risk of him not being fully utilized at that level, at the next level. So that's something I'm definitely intrigued by. And he is one of the more interesting players because it's hard to find, not that I'm really good on comps between college and NBA anyway, but it's hard to find like okay, he reminds me of this guy. Like, first thing that came to my mind, not having watched anything, I'm like, oh, Sean Bradley. I don't even know. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
that was just tall white dude. I was like, okay, it has to be him. Like, no, like there's a lot more skill there on both sides of the ball. And it's only a matter of whether we see that at the next level. But I think that's really cool. And you said it. It's already weird that he has you're deferring to a more experienced, like the bigger, not the bigger college player, but the alpha college player right now, you know, that he's playing alongside. So that's definitely interesting. But going from him to another guy that I haven't heard a lot about, but I'm definitely intrigued to hear your words on, Jalen Duren. What can you tell about Jalen Duren? And then I guess we can go from him to Jay Nivey if you want to kind of get both of them. Although, yeah, let's kind of talk about the next two because they're just outside of that or in that like main mix, depending on who you talk to.
yeah, outside the top three, it's a little bit more fluid because it's going to be sort of an eye of the beholder situation. I'm not quite as maybe high on Duren as some others, but I see the ability in him. I mean, he's a really athletic kind of rim runner, but kind of raw offensively. I mean, he's not really a great shooter or passer. But still a guy who could be really effective kind of at the NBA level, just as, again, on offense, just rim runner, guy who can kind of be that vertical kind of lob threat. And then, great shot blocker, rebounder. So like the upside of this is probably somewhere around a DeAndre Jordan, Andre Drummond sort of type.
Oh, wow.
So it's where it's like, it's someone, who can, again, if you give him kind of the right kind of, playmaking partner, you can maybe see some of that in him, but, kind of, he's been kind of lost a little bit kind of at Memphis because they haven't kind of reached kind of the expectations that they kind of had coming into the season. So their offense seems kind of disjointed at times. And so he goes stretches without touching the ball. But he still kind of is a presence, kind of protecting the rim and things like that. But he's a little bit undisciplined, just, in terms of just with his positioning and committing fouls and that nature. So there's still some room to grow, and he's got to be coached up a little bit more. Okay. So there's some risk that maybe like, if something doesn't quite pan out right, that he might just end up being sort of like, some kind of rotational kind of big. So
yeah.
So it'd be tough, it'd be tough, for me to pay, kind of that big premium at the top of the draft to, get somebody that you might be able to get similar value later on. But but if again, if you have the kind of like, if maybe, if you're like in Oak City where you have a lot of talent a lot of young talent on the perimeter, maybe, kind of having that, having that athletic big to kind of pair with some of these guys might be worthwhile.
Okay, definitely. So, I mean, it does sound like that's definitely an interesting fit, and that he's going to be very team dependent on where he flourishes because, well, actually, it's not exactly true, but he's going to be very team dependent on whether he like stands out because like you said, in the year 2022, DeAndre Jordan type, those are easily found. As a Laker fan, we have two of those guys, in DeAndre Jordan and Dwight Howard, the rim running, play above the rim. Granted, are the Lakers versions are a little older, but in terms of that archetype. So the fact that he doesn't bring no jump shooting at all, like he doesn't bring any of that to the table.
Yeah, he's below 60% on his free throws. Oh. So it's kind of, the shot kind of, if it's there, it's a bit it's not totally reliable. He's not really, much of a passer. So there's not, so he's really limited to kind of, being kind of that, kind of dunker spot, kind of rim runner type of guy, kind of roll to the rim sort of guy.
Yeah, so. That archetype. Okay. Wow. Well, that's definitely a little bit of a downer for me. I was hoping, again, we don't know that's what he can grow into, but as of right now, you're right. I don't need a lot of hype.
There's a lot of room to grow. So it's like, again, some of the, he could zoom way past that projection, with, but right now it's tough to kind of see where the skill level is not quite, it's still raw at this stage.
That makes sense. I get you. And then going from him to Jaden Ivey, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, he's made a big improvement from his freshman year. Kind of not, kind of struggled a bit last year, but this year he's really kind of leveled up and become, a really, really good player for Purdue. I mean, one of the things that works in his favor, he's a really good shooter off the catch, so he can run off screens, good spot up shooter. Off the dribble, he's a little bit inconsistent, especially from deep. Like his percentages on kind of pull up threes isn't really that great, but he is a little bit better kind of pulling up from mid-range, so he does have the ability to grow into that sort of lead kind of shot creating kind of scoring guard. He's improved, he's gotten better as a passer, but it's still not, he doesn't quite have that kind of natural feel for it right now. So it's he can be a little kind of, almost mechanical, or kind of, he might think kind of sequentially at times. So if there's something kind of unexpected, it doesn't quite see the opening as kind of quickly as he should. But if he works on if he works on his playmaking and his ability to score off the dribble, there might be, the upside might be something, if everything breaks absolutely perfectly, maybe he's in that sort of, kind of maybe in that like Brad Beal, like maybe some, whatever the level down from Bradley Beal is, that kind of guy. But
okay.
Yeah, but kind of on average, a guy, I was looking kind of just through like just running kind of preliminary thoughts, kind of on average, guys like this tend to be more like, kind of like sixth man types, like OJ Mayo, or like Ben, he might be or like a bigger version of Ben Gordon, because defensively he's kind of, maybe average kind of at best. There's not a lot of length, he's just not, they kind of hide him a little bit. So he's not, so he's really going to be kind of, everything's going to depend on his offense more so than, kind of any kind of two-way ability. So, if he kind of if he improves his ability with the ball, then you could probably see him hit the upper end of his projection. But, kind of in kind of a floor, kind of at worst situation, it's a good kind of scoring guard off the bench kind of
role,
kind of situation.
That makes sense. So basically, if you're saying, I instantly came when you said a little bit like a lesser version Bradley Beal. I think Bradley Beal's an above average shooting guard, so now we're looking at an average guard, right? Probably the best way of thinking about that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I definitely get that. Okay, so with that being said, I kind of move to the next kind of transition here, and that's really not on any, I guess, specific player, but just a unit as a whole. You can kind of pick any standouts. But what are your thoughts on the G League Ignite team and their prospects that are looking to enter the NBA draft this year? And as Jaden Hardy, that's a Michael Foster, a Dyson Daniels, and a Marjon Beauchamp. Like, kind of what are your thoughts on the G League Ignite team in general? I know there's a great article I read just recently from NBA Live Scout, NBAScoutingLive.com, that kind of went into, I think it was a contest or two that had some observations on that.
Yeah, I think this year's G League Ignite team isn't as strong as last year's, because last year you had Jalen Green and Kuminga, and so like those guys, you had high, really, kind of definite sort of high end kind of lottery type talents. But this year's team kind of isn't quite, we're kind of looking more like kind of mid to late kind of mid to late first or even second round type guys. Actually, the best prospect on their team is Scoot Henderson, who's not available for this draft, but he's eligible for next year's draft, and he's going to be in the Rising Stars Challenge at All-Star Weekend.
Interesting.
But with this draft, I mean, they haven't, this year's G League Ignite team really hasn't they've kind of shown the flaws, kind of, they've had bright spots, they've had flaws, and so it's going to be kind of a situation where if they land in a spot where they can kind of bring the best out of them, you might get something, you might, kind of get some value out of that. Of them, I think Dyson Daniels might be the best prospect out of them, where, he's a good, kind of he's Australian, big kind of ball handling guard. So it kind of has from a playmaking ball handling standpoint, kind of has some similarities to Josh Giddey, but his shot has kind of been inconsistent. But he's been solid. He's been kind of solid, kind of as a defensive player. So if his shot kind of comes around, you might be able to get a pretty good player out of there. And then Jaden Hardy is kind of a scoring guard, but his shot selection can be kind of pretty questionable at times. So he has he's had a lot of nights where he's like 2 for 14, or those kind of tough shooting nights. So yeah, if he kind of improves his shot selection, he might come around. Beauchamp kind of fits kind of that 3-and-D profile, but the shot isn't kind of where it is, and defensively is a little bit kind of unpolished, where he's not always kind of clean in his rotations and things like that. And then Michael Foster's fit is kind of a little bit questionable, just because he kind of fits that old kind of power forward mold, but he's not really a rim protector, kind of undersized to be a center, doesn't have any real doesn't have polished perimeter skills, but kind of but in terms of like rebounding and things like that, he does provide rebounding and some inside scoring. He can provide that. So that's more or less kind of where we stand kind of with those G League Ignite prospects.
Okay. So it's weird. I mean, you brought up the like Michael Foster kind of being a throwback, to the old style, like big man power forward type. And then Jalen Duren also being an old school type. I mean, maybe Foster going back a little further than Duren, but it seems like you have a lot of guys in this draft who are trying to bring, the late 90s, mid 2000s, early 2010s back.
Yeah, that is kind of, like a little bit where, you do have some types where you're, again, had it been like, even had it been, a few years earlier, they might be valued a little more. I mean, you kind of see that sometimes with guys who are, like point guards that have that sort of, that classic sort of pass first profile that, where, back in, back 10, 15 years ago, they probably would have been, lottery picks, but then they, kind of move lower just because, because shooting is at such a premium nowadays, and kind of switching and things of that nature, switching on defense. So some of the players that kind of fit older roles, even though you see talent and you see production, you kind of have to sort of figure out where they fit nowadays.
That makes sense, and I guess that's a large part of evaluating, because I'm not only seeing like who they are and how they are as players now, what they project to be, and where they fit on teams. So definitely with you there. Speaking of evaluating, are there any players right now that you look at in this draft that might seem to not be overrated, but like valued higher than you might have them, compared to the consensus? Maybe, guys are really high on Jabari Smith, and you're like, hey, I don't really see that. Like, who are those players for you? Just a couple that, not that you're down on them, just that you're not like selling the farm on them.
Yeah, I think there's probably the most kind of disagreement just in terms of what I've seen from just about the kind of the crop of wing guys, where some guys value certain guys high, that maybe a little more polished, or for whatever reason some guys fall, some guys rise, and so you get like a little bit, maybe people's value systems are a little different, where they might put more of an emphasis on kind of polish and production, and some people might have more of a emphasis on tools. So you get certain guys like maybe Benedict Mathurin is a guy that has sort of seen his stock rise to the lottery, but I depending on again what list I see, I might have somebody rated higher. I think AJ Griffin's stock has started to rise to the point where it kind of matches sort of where I have him, because I have him because at the beginning of the season he kind of wasn't, for whatever reason he wasn't playing very much at Duke, and then he started to get regular minutes, and so and his his efficiency is held up with more playing time. So he's started to kind of seen himself kind of rise to kind of that, kind of top 10 as well. So this is going to be kind of one of those situations where, it's going to be kind of like the middle to like the late lottery part of the draft is going to be a little more fluid, where maybe somebody might have somebody as a lottery pick and somebody else has them as like a, late or a second rounder. And so it's kind of like that last year with Josh Primo, where there was just no consensus across the board on him. So to the point where, the Spurs had him and they picked him 11th, and some people had him as a first round pick. Some people had him as a second round pick. And so, it comes back to, teams and whoever's evaluating, they're going to be different boards. So this draft in particular is a little bit of it's a little more fluid sort of after you get past about 4 or 5, where people are going to start to have some disagreements. And so you might see people rated higher or lower than expected.
Okay. I like that. I think it's definitely a nuanced answer in regards to how you look at it and where they rise or fall for sure, in your own personal take. So I appreciate that. Are there any gems outside the lottery that you have your eyes set on? Guys that, we do look back on that are, next year's steal, at their draft position?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer just literally because one of the things, because the boards are so fluid. So in terms of finding guys that are definitively outside of the lottery. So I think I was looking at this and the one name that comes to mind may be Caleb Houston from Michigan. Caleb Houston from Michigan, early in the season, he was tabbed as a lottery pick. He kind of had some struggles with his shot just because, so he had some struggles with his shot, and that was, kind of what he was kind of advertised as. But sort of as he's gotten through playing the Big Ten, his shot has been falling. And so, he's sort of grown a little more comfortable in his role where, he's playing kind of off of some, kind of other kind of experienced players. So he's kind of settled down, and he's been able to, establish himself as a really good kind of shooter, kind of off the catch, especially in real stationary situations like spot ups or kind of some, open threes in transition. Okay. When he has his focus, he can be a really solid defender, but he kind of just gets kind of sloppy. So he could kind of project into the future in kind of a 3-and-D kind of role if he lands kind of in the right situation. So, okay. And slipping in to some extent actually might end up working out for him, because he might end up in kind of with a better team that has kind of a more sound kind of structure. So they are able, so he'll kind of better kind of understand his role and who to kind of play off of him. There won't be kind of the same kind of expectations that, that he might have like entered college with, where, not having that, not having that kind of pressure on him might allow him to kind of easily kind of grow into what he's supposed to be at the NBA level.
Okay. Yeah. Not having that pressure, that ceiling on him. I get that for sure. Okay. All right. So I guess with that, I'm just going to kind of throw these out at you, kind of fun, just kind of rapid fire, and just get your initial kind of takes on these. Like my NBA superlatives I used to do, just get the first thing that comes to mind, whoever you nominate as the best. As of what right now, I do understand this is still February, but as of right now, who is the best shooter in the draft, Richard?
Just based on kind of what I have, Max Abmas from Oral Roberts. He's been, kind of a high volume scorer at a small school. He can shoot. Yeah, he can shoot it kind of in all ways. He's a good spot, good kind of stationary kind of spot up shooter, can run off screens, good kind of pull up shooter from off the dribble, has really deep range. He's probably not going to be kind of in that primary creator role that he is kind of at Oral Roberts, just because he's not like, he's kind of small. He doesn't quite have kind of the elite athleticism, but the shot is there. He has good kind of court sense on the offensive end. So he could kind of be the kind of guy who grows into like a kind of a variation of somebody like Seth Curry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like
kind of
that.
a shooting specialist. So that's kind of, you're looking for a shooting specialist. That's kind of the guy. Another guy I considered, Johnny Juzang from UCLA.
Okay.
Really good off the catch. I mean, he's good spot up, runs off screens, little overextended because he's the in kind of a main role because he isn't really as consistent creating his own shot off the dribble. But kind of if he kind of goes to the pros and kind of gets put in kind of a complementary kind of role, you could see kind of his kind of shooting efficiency kind of crank up because he's got a good good mechanics, good clean stroke.
Okay, that is cool. All right, so I guess from there, Richard, the next, the best passer / ball handler. I wanted to say floor general, but that's the best way I can describe it to myself.
Yeah, it's kind of like, there isn't like in this draft like that traditional kind of like playmaking point guard because most of the point guard prospects really kind of are more scoring minded.
Okay.
But kind of in terms of that kind of like really good playmaker ball handler kind of thing, Dyson Daniels is a real, really good ball handler. And could probably, be kind of, could maybe probably legitimately play point guard. And he has great, he's averaging somewhere, I like to say last time I checked, was somewhere around 6 assists in the G League. So he does have good court vision, in the half court transition, kind of, on good days, I do kind of see some like flashes of kind of like the young version of Sean Livingston when he plays. So good ball handler. And then the ability, the tall point guard that can kind of see over kind of the smaller defenders and kind of find open players. So that's
using his size to his advantage in terms of playmaking purposes.
Yeah,
definitely get that. All right, so the best rebounder.
Yeah, the best rebounder. I gotta just go with numbers on this one. Oscar Tshiebwe from Kentucky leads the NCAA in every rebounding category.
Wow.
Off it. Yeah. So he was already a good rebounder at West Virginia. And then this season at Kentucky, he's been just absolutely just killing it on the boards. I think I last saw like per game, it's just, he's at 15. And then you just break it down, offense, defense, per minute, possession. He's the leader in every single category.
Wow.
So it's hard to argue against that.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I mean, if he grabs everything in rebounding, you kind of have the answer there. The best defender. I know there's a few kind of intriguing guys here, but who is your just straight up best defender that you see so far in this draft?
Yeah, it was hard for me to argue against Jabari Smith as the best defender, where, again, he has just a lot of versatility on that end where, he can defend on the ball, he can roam, he defends at the, he's good defender around the rim. So it's kind of, and then, just in terms of just looking at kind of situational metrics, he rates as very good or better in just any kind of situation. So there was kind of not much that nobody really that kind of
came close
other than Holmgren. And I guess, in terms of just kind of breaking the tie, it was just, Jabari Smith's mobility, just, kind of put him over the top, so that's what I would I'd probably go with Jabari Smith in terms of that.
Okay, that makes sense. And then lastly, Richard, your best on-ball shot creator from scratch, give him the ball. He's going to make a shot happen, last second of shot clock, last possession, or just a bucket in a hurry. Yeah,
I'd probably go Paolo Banchero is probably the best on-ball shot creator where, he can get it, he can get anywhere he wants, with the ball where, he can post smaller defenders, he's open kind of in spot up situations. He can knock down outside shots. He can, he's good, good at driving to the rim. And then, if you bring help, he does have the ability to find the right pass to kind of set up others. So when it's there, but if you need a bucket, that probably is the guy to go to.
Okay. Well, Richard, I appreciate this, man. Thank you for coming on and giving me the time. Definitely want to have you on again, of course, close to the draft season, maybe do some big boards, maybe something there. But I just want to thank you from the top. And please, before I let you go, sir, where can you tell listeners to kind of find your work? Obviously, NBA Scouting Live, but I know you also have your almanacs. Definitely take the time here. Let the listeners know where they can find more of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter as at RVL Hoops. And so, yeah, I also write 2 almanacs a year. You can find them www.amazon.com/author/RVL Hoops. That basically is my author page, and it has it'll take you to all the books that have come out so far. And then, yeah, I edit NBA Scouting Live. Most of the writing on that is done by my brother Alan. So yeah, NBAscoutinglive.com. And then and if anyone's ever if any of your listeners are in the Seattle area, I also organize a meetup group, NBA Seattle, on the Meetup app.
Oh, that is cool.
And you can hang out and watch basketball and talk about all this stuff in person if you're vaccinated.
That is cool. Hey, I might be down there next month, so I might take you up on that one, sir. Well, listen, man, I appreciate you, Richard. Thank you again for your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me. It was great. Yeah.
Always. And listen, y'all know where to find Richard. You know where to find me. If not, it's fine on Twitter at Corbin NBA. I'm not mad about it. No problem at all. Make sure to check out Sports Ethos on Twitter at Sports Ethos, online, sportsethos.com. One last thing, y'all, quickly before we sign off. Want to remind y'all to use the coupon code HoopBall20. That's HOOPBALL20 at manscaped.com for 20% off your order and free shipping. And also check out our pals at MyBookie.ag. Use the code HoopBall on the third page to sign up to unlock deposit match bonuses there as well. That's going to do it here for us around Ball Ramble. Thank y'all again for your time. For Richard, for myself, we are Frosty. Y'all stay frosty, and I will talk to y'all tomorrow. All right, y'all.